Hello, my name is Taya, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report. As I always make clear, this show has a single purpose, holding the politically powerful institution of policing accountable. And to do so, we don't just focus on the bad behavior of individual cops. Instead, we examine the system that makes bad policing possible. And to achieve that goal today, we're going to examine the brutal arrest of a cop watcher and discuss what the officer's actions tell us about the current state of the First Amendment in this country and the rights of activists writ large. But before we get started, I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct, please email it to us privately at par@therealnews.com, and we might be able to investigate for you. And of course, you can always message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Twitter and Facebook. And please like, share, and comment on our videos. It really does help us, and you know I read our comments. And today in the comments, we will have pinned our new Patreon account for Police Accountability Report. So please check it out. Okay, now we've got that out of the way. Now, as anyone who watches our show already knows, we try to keep tabs on a growing phenomena in this country known as cop watching. As we reported before, on any given day, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of First Amendment activists pointing their cameras at police with the shared goal of holding them accountable. It's a vast and complex process that we try to unpack as much as we can, and it's an important, organic, and grassroots movement that fills the void that the mainstream media often ignores, which is why when we were sent this video of the brutal arrest of a cop watcher, we immediately got in touch with the man you see here being thrown to the ground by police. His name is David Boren, and he's a cop watcher from Texas who sometimes works with another well-known auditor and cop watcher, James Freeman. What is most disturbing about what you're seeing here is that it all started with a simple and decidedly American act, filming from a sidewalk. But as David Boren explains to us, when a cop asks them to stop, the situation quickly got out of hand.
James and I were just driving down the road. We were heading into Dallas that night, and we saw Rockwall PD have someone pull over on our way to the freeway. So we thought we'd pull over and just film them real quick to make sure everything was on the up and up. And that's what brought us to the scene.
And then, so what happened when you got to the scene?
We just started filming them and, just make sure they behave.
And so when did it start going awry, or not awry, but when did they start being aggressive towards you, and why?
Most cops, if they're decent, good people or good cops, what people might classify them as, they wouldn't care if there's a camera or someone videotaping them because they're not concerned about their behavior. When police officers say, "Oh, I don't mind you recording," but then you have to think in your head, well, if this guy doesn't mind me recording you, why is he giving me instructions or boundaries if I'm not in his immediate workspace?
We actually had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Boren in person to discuss the case. During our interview, he's able to break down what happened and why he ended up in jail for literally taking video of a traffic stop. Let's listen to him set the scene.
Yeah, I think it was personal. They wanted to retaliate against me. I think for a good portion of it, Rockwall PD behaves for the most part. They're not near as bad as Dallas or Fort Worth or Baltimore or some of the bigger cities, but they still have bad cops in their department.
Shortly after the officer asked him to move, his partner, James Freeman, pushed back. Then, even as Mr. Boren started to move away from the scene, the officer chased him and threw him to the ground. Let's watch, and while we do, let's hear Mr. Boren's account of what happened.
And these two are definitely corrupt and bad cops, and it's self-evident in the video.
What did they charge you with?
Impeding an investigation, resisting arrest, and interference.
As we can see, the arrest was brutal, and really all the result of a mostly routine and non-confrontational form of cop watching Mr. Boren engages in on a regular basis. Let's listen.
And we do have a First Amendment right. That's why we have the Constitution. I mean, our forefathers fought for that right for us to express ourselves. And as long as we're not immediately threatening somebody or, crossing that barrier where we're, initiating violence.
But it seems like some members of the Rockwall, Texas police force are not okay with being observed or held accountable. Yet still, Mr. Boren says cop watching is more important than ever, even though he continues to face prosecution.
These police officers, when they arrest you, and most people don't know this, when they arrest you, they try to break your wrist. They put those handcuffs on so tight, and there's circumferences is like a real circle. But as you can see, Our wrists are more like a square or
Right. Okay.
rectangle.
Sure.
So when they say, "Oh, I can fit 2 fingers in the cuffs," that don't matter. You're still trying to break my wrist. And then a lot of times, what we see when we come up to a stop and someone's arrested, if we don't show up, they may have this guy sitting on the curb for half an hour or even an hour. They're just going to chill, and what they're trying to do is teach these people a lesson, and then they'll take them to the much like Freddie Gray. Every police officer does it. They do these little things where they're going to teach you a lesson. They're going to grab your hand and say, "Oh, stop resisting," and then body slam your head into the car and say, "Stop resisting," and that's their go-to move for a while. But now they're getting a little bit smarter. They're trying to do more things that aren't so obvious. So one of the things they do is that they try to break your wrists.
For more on how shooting video from a sidewalk is not a crime and the implication for journalism and transparency everywhere, I'm joined by my reporting partner, Stephen Janis. Stephen, thank you for joining us.
Tay, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, first of all, what are the rules about shooting video from a sidewalk? Can police stop this legally?
Well, first of all, if there's one place that's sacred in shooting video as a reporter, it's the damn sidewalk, because there's so many places are private, and private property is kind of off limits if the owner doesn't let you. So usually all you have is a damn sidewalk. So if we can't use the sidewalk, it pretty much shuts us down.
Now, let's just say the prosecutor pressed this case and won. What are the implications for both journalism and cop watching?
If you start criminalizing the sidewalk, you're going to criminalize video journalism to the point where it won't exist. I can't say it enough how emphatic it is that we have done our journalism so many times from a sidewalk. And without that safe perch, I believe that you'll see the end of video journalism. It's extremely, extremely important and risky.
So, from your experience, was it important to fight to push the boundaries of being able to film and record police or any other public officials?
Let me tell you, every time I start shooting on a sidewalk, some cop or someone would come up to me and be like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And I would always say, I don't have to answer that question. I feel very much like the auditors say, I don't have to give my ID, because people would push me. And I felt like if I had to identify myself and tell them what I'm doing, then I'm not really able to exercise my First Amendment rights. Then I'm ceding ground to the power of law enforcement and government.
So, as you can see, the rights afforded under the First Amendment are hardly guaranteed, even within the domain of a public sidewalk. I mean, it's clear from the arrest of David Boren, cops don't like to be watched and will do everything within their power to ensure people like David Boren and James Freeman can't. But that raises a question. Why not? What's the big deal? What are police hiding during routine traffic stops that warrant a brutal arrest to cover it up? What is it exactly they don't want us to see? Well, consider a recent story about a little-known division of the Commerce Department and what it says about law enforcement when it operates exclusively outside of the purview of public scrutiny. The Commerce Department is supposed to promote job creation and economic growth and provide data to support commerce and constitutional democracy. But according to this report run by the Washington Post, an obscure unit of the Commerce Department, the Investigative Threats and Management Service, that hardly had any police powers, has secretly turned into a veritable counterintelligence operation. A department so out of control, it was reading the emails of employees without their permission or a warrant and surveilled those who criticized the agency. This little police-like unit was supposed to focus on transnational crime and counterterrorism, and instead, it turned its power against the American citizens who worked there. And the most interesting part of this story is how this illegal conduct continued for 4 years and only came to light because of a whistleblower. In fact, the so-called Investigative Threats and Management Service was actually supposed to protect employees of the Commerce Department, but instead spied on critics of the agency and Asian employees who they accused, without evidence, of being disloyal. The point of sharing this story, though, is not just to illustrate another federal agency gone bad, or to highlight how power can corrupt almost any process, but rather how ripe for abuse and socially volatile the power of policing really is. I mean, it's like a virus when you think about it, an idea that spreads and infiltrates all facets of our lives unless it's put in check and closely watched. I mean, do you think any of the people that founded this country would envisage a branch of government where random people could pull people over for no reason, chase people off of sidewalks, restrict the ability to free expression and to peaceable assembly? Would they have ever intended for the Constitution to be used to seize property and belongings without the presumption of crime and then sold to fund the process over and over again. Seriously, I doubt it. I doubt that the idea of free and fair government included the specter of an armed force that was given blanket permission to mete out death and injury based on a reasonable fear. I doubt anyone seeking to build a productive form of governance would add to their list of things to do, create a standing army, give them special perks, benefits, guns, military equipment, and then set them among the general populace with few, if any, restrictions on their power. That's why the work of people like Dave Boren and James Freeman is so important. And that's why we want to continue to follow the work and efforts of cop watchers like Eric Brandt. That's why we talk to people like Otto the Watchdog and Blind Justice. And that's why reporting on the efforts of people like Irate, Tom Zebra, and Lars Shark will always be a primary focus of this show. Because as we have seen, democracy is fragile. It is hard to nurture and grow, and much easier to destroy. Freedom of speech and the right to peaceable assembly are much easier to cast aside out of fear and loathing than they are to sustain and maintain for all of us. And that's why we will continue to report on those who fight for it and who continue to highlight the cops who try to snuff it out. I want to thank David Boren for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you so much, David. And of course, I have to thank intrepid reporter Stephen Janis for his reporting, writing, and editing on this piece. Thank you, Stephen.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And I want to thank friend of the show, Noli D, for her support. Thanks, Noli D. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. Please reach out to us. You can email us tips privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence of police misconduct. You can also message us at Police Accountability Report on Facebook or Instagram, or at Eyes on Police on Twitter. And of course, you can always message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Twitter or Facebook. And please like and comment. It really helps. And of course, I read your comments and appreciate them. And I try to answer your questions whenever I can. And don't forget our new Police Accountability Report Patreon, where we have some extra goodies for those who become patrons, including a public thank you. My name is Taya Graham, and I'm your host of the Police Accountability Report. Please be safe out there.